The following is an unscripted stream of consciousness discussion between two lifelong pals who love all things rock and roll. I'm Stephen Bard.
And I'm Ryan Ball.
And this is No Holds Barred from Inside the Gearbox.
Well, welcome everybody. We're back at the Gearbox here for episode number 2 of No Holds Barred from Inside the Gearbox. I'm here with my good friend Stephen. And today we're going to talk about 2 albums. One really, but 2 versions of the same album. As you may know, this is the 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And Roger Waters has recently released a Redux version of that, Reduction. I would say that's an appropriate name considering what it's all about sonically, and I think even I'll just come right out and say it. It's a reduction of the quality of the original idea. So get right into this thing.
Great.
How's that for an opening salvo?
I like it. Dark Side of the Moon. A lot happens between 30 and 80.
Yeah, I mean, he was 28 when he penned all those
Pretty
lyrics.
much. He turned 30 the year the album was released.
Okay, right. Okay, so I guess
He turned 80 this year.
Yeah.
In 2023.
Wow.
A 50-year span of one of the great pieces of art. You could also say one of the great rock albums. This is art of the highest order. Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Modern art that I would put with anything by anybody you care to mention in any art form. It's a Renaissance piece, right up there with, dare I say, Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, Bernstein and Sondheim's West Side Story, and the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band,
And on.
Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life, Gone with the Wind, Streetcar Named Desire, Goodfellas, whatever.
Well, yes.
Schindler's List.
It is.
The Color Purple.
It holds that space for sure.
Hannah and Her Sisters, Annie Hall, whatever. It's right there.
It definitely holds that space.
I mean, here we are 50 years later.
Right. Whether or not I think also this anniversary was happening or this other record had happened, we'd still be talking about it anyway.
Oh, no question.
So it's worth talking about just from that point of view. The anniversary and re-release are relatively insignificant in terms of why we're talking about it. But they've happened.
Yeah.
so
let's
talk about those too. Yeah.
I say 50 is a good number for art. When a piece of art reaches 50 and it's still relevant and resonant.
It doesn't happen often.
Doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And Dark Side of the Moon is an example where it's even better at 50. How's that? And we should talk about why.
Well, yeah, let's save the Raj thing for part 2 here. But why is it even better? It's at least as good and even better because the thematic content not only is universal in terms of its application to humanity itself, but it's the era doesn't seem to matter. It's a constant. It's the constant state of humanity that he is pointing at, that he is showcasing and exploring and lamenting, and all of these things are not changing, which maybe from the eyes of a 30-year-old, he had a hopeful vision of it changing, and maybe, who knows, he might have been the consummate cynic in his entire life. I don't know, probably. Think about his personality. I'm sure that's a true statement, but it's packaged in a different way because I think of the contributions of the other people involved. So, and you can get more than that from it as a listener and an interpreter because of that. So that's why it's still relevant. That's why it's great and even better. And I play this music often, so it's something that if it wasn't the test, and you have this experience, I'm sure too, and any musician who does other artists' work consistently can tell how good it is by the bearability of its repetition
and inhabiting it
Yeah.
in a
Can you keep getting more out of it? Can you keep enjoying it? Can you find new things? Can you be excited by it over and over and over again? And the answer is yes.
You're really hitting it right out of the park, right on your first at bat here, Ryan. Because that point that you just made is also about human relationships, which is going to flow into what comes next. The beauty of the greatest art is that it never tires. It never wanes. There's always something for you to glean from it, to be enriched by, to be stimulated, inspired, turned on, excited, provoked. That is the function of art, along with what you said about it's reflecting humanity. Art at its purest and finest form is an honest reflection of the human condition. And Roger Waters, in all his brilliance as a conceptual thinker disguised as a songwriter and musician, was able to create a thesis on the human condition that has been rarely equaled. He nailed it at 28, 29, 30. Having lost his father before ever knowing him, with a activist, pacifist mother who he inherited his courageous crusading from. I think at his core, Roger Waters is a humanist. Whether he's an anthropologist and loves people, that I'm not so sure. But he's, with his poetic genius and his ability to write lyrics that cut to the bone, very much like one of his main heroes and inspirations, John Lennon. And they're working in EMI at Abbey Road. I mean, it's the connections are what they are.
Sure.
Pink Floyd was signed by Norman Smith, the original engineer of the Beatles, at Abbey Road Studios for EMI. Pink Floyd was the next installment of that kind of quality in rock and roll and popular music. And Roger Waters, by the time they get through the Metal album, is starting to assert his, because Sid is gone.
Long gone.
His Sid Barrett was the guy that Roger Waters loved in Pink Floyd. They were pals. Sid's gone. And the guy who took his place, who for my money wins every time, Mr. David Gilmour. Sid's great, but David Gilmour is the Paul McCartney of Pink Floyd. And you need it. Just like John Lennon needed Paul McCartney and the Beatles. Or else it's all, not all, but it's all pain.
Yeah, it's jagged edges.
The pain and the jagged edges, okay?
Dave did the same McCartney thing of smoothing it out and
the emollient.
Shaping. Yeah.
You need it, man.
Although Dave did not have the compositional prowess that a Paul McCartney.
That's okay.
But you're talking about within
I'm talking about his function
band dynamic
in the Pink Floyd collective.
Gotcha.
So he's serving that.
I mean, as far as his offering to the band.
Yes. His purpose in Pink Floyd mirrors Paul McCartney's purpose and function in the Beatles. I'm not comparing David Gilmour and Paul McCartney that way. But David Gilmour is one heck of a composer and a fantastic musician and a fabulous singer. So in those facets, he's right there with McCartney.
Yeah.
And his voice is the McCartney of the Floyd.
Oh, yeah.
It's that sweet, light, sunshine, more sunshine. I mean, Dave can get dark, but just the quality of his voice provides it's like if it's all this all the time, that your hands get raw.
Sure.
And you start to bleed. And then you're like, wait a minute.
Can't take
Is this
it
what I signed up for?
Much.
No. You can't take right.
Yeah.
You can't take it like you need that spoonful of sugar, if you'll forgive me.
Absolutely.
The Mary Poppins reference. But you need the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And Roger Waters is hard medicine.
Yeah.
Like you take that on an empty stomach.
Yeah. You're gonna get ill.
And you're gonna get ill. Right?
It's true, but that's a good analogy to real life. He's dealing you reality is kind of what he's doing. He's just laying down the cards of reality, over and over again. And it's not everyone's reality, but it's an overview.
Yeah. It's a pretty accurate overview.
I think so. Right. If
of
you
a
really
worldview.
uncover things and you look honestly at the condition, again, it's a human condition thesis, like you said. It's accurate, and it's not the first or only exposition of that sort of thing. It's
just one of the better ones,
right? And it's done during a time when that really wasn't what rock and roll was providing for people. It was about to. I think they ushered in a more of a
thoughtful, introspective,
mm-hmm.
societal, reflective.
Yeah,
it's Conjuring at that.
Yeah, but that
they nailed
really
it.
Bursts out.
That's a zeitgeist moment where that is occurring, but in a package that makes it go down easy.
Yeah. Well, that's literally too. So if you look at, you were talking about it as a piece of art, but not only is what you're hearing, the composition and the execution of it, but every other aspect of it, the way they toured it and presented it live and started to showcasing the music and the production as the focus instead of the band. They really diminished themselves in favor of the piece and the artwork on the record and the people who were involved with that. Have you seen this film called Squaring the Circle?
No, but I
fantastic. It's about the Hypnosis guys, and not just that record, but it's a big part of their history. Pink Floyd is a massive part of their history. So, so even the inside artwork, the posters that you got with it, the pyramids, the shots of them playing live, and like all good rock musicians, as far as presenting themselves that way, that it becomes more of like fantastic comic book superhero-esque, the way, the color of those pictures, the way they looked in them.
Iconic.
That's the best way of
that. They're one of the most, and that's why
summarizing it. Yeah,
they were brilliant with their iconography of their band, and they perfect it with Dark Side of the Moon,
mm-hmm.
and then it stays that way till the end. But they got it right.
They knew what to do.
They got right. Point. They figured it out, and there you go.
Yeah,
and it flows through the rest of the Pink Floyd catalog and legacy. Now, conversely, when Roger leaves, for me, it's also not as good for that same reason.
Yeah.
Because it's McCartney without Lennon. And this is the beauty of the collective. And this is the beauty of rock and roll music. And this is the beauty of a rock and roll band. The collective in creation is infinitely more powerful. And why? Because it's not one person. Because one person, even if that one person is Prince, or Stevie Wonder, or Joni Mitchell, or whoever you want to talk about, or Bob Dylan. It's not the same as when a collective of artistic people who, by the luck of the draw, the timing, the fate, the happy accident, Dave Gilmour walks in, saves the band, and they trudge along for several years.
Oh, yeah.
68, 69. They're doing interesting experimental art rock, and it's all worthy stuff. They find their way to the metal album. Fantastic. They're finding their way. The collective is gelling, learning to work together, fashioning themselves after the Beatles, who were the first true, successful artistic collective in the rock and roll genre. Pink Floyd, working in that same studio, signed to the same label. 3 singers, a quirky, idiosyncratic drummer, a tight, fabulous rhythm section, a stunning lead guitarist, and an inventive, imaginative keyboard player, figuring out how to do it in composition, arrangement, and production, and Dark Side of the Moon occurs. But it is only because of the magical, I use the word alchemy, the alchemy of that collective, of that team, where Roger is clearly, again, he's the concept man, he's the director, he's the screenwriter, he's the text writer. And it's right there in plain bold face, right in the gatefold of the album, all lyrics by Roger Waters. It's right there. But not that music.
No.
And the music is always more important than the lyric. Because without the music,
there's nothing to deliver.
There's nothing to deliver you the thought, the concept, the brief, the theme, the statement. All very important. And I'm not diminishing anything, because for me, the greatest art in the world is the pop song, in which the lyric and the music combine in a perfect symbiosis. Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, Richard Wright, Nick Mason, and lyricist, bass player, and co-lead singer Roger Waters nailed it. Found perfection 50 years ago with The Dark Side of the Moon.
Yes. Yeah, what else can be said about the greatness of it and the process that...
There's a lot to be said about it.
I mean, in terms of that being the obviousness of it, we have it. It's here. If you want to put it in terms of economics even, it was on the top.
Billboard forever. I mean, still is, I think.
Yeah. So, which is...
Yeah, it's the numbers...
Staggering. That's a staggering
The worldwide numbers prove out that an immense amount of humanity got it and wanted it.
Continue to.
And continue to get it generation after generation. You see it every night.
Sure.
And it's young people continue to come out. Now, let's talk a little bit about the aesthetic as to why that is. There's also, at the time, a lot of great art reflects also not only the human condition, but the technology of the age, right? And the way that the art is delivered is part and parcel with that, in that hi-fi recording equipment, stereo equipment. Also, the Beatles had broken through from 8-track into 16-track. And the Beatles' developments and evolution was pushing the technology to keep up with their ideas. By the time Floyd gets to recording their new album in, I would assume, 72, was the majority of the recording process, getting ready for a 73 release. The hi-fi recording equipment of the day and the recording equipment of the day had made major advances. And Dark Side of the Moon, as a formal album release, was one of the records that pushed the sales of hi-fi stereo equipment, because you just had to hear Dark Side of the Moon on
good stuff.
Because it was such a high watermark of modern recording studio engineering and technique.
Right.
And it bears out. It's a tremendously good sounding record. There's so much going on in it. There's so many layers of musical beauty and transcendence. It's a crystalline, shimmering recording.
Yeah, it's velvety. I like to...
Why don't you describe the sonics?
There's a lot to it. It evolves through the record for lots of different reasons. There's a lot of space in that record, too. That should be mentioned, because that is a hallmark of the era as well, which is kind of sorrowfully not what we're used to anymore in modern music, good space,
Yeah.
Dynamic range and space, not just in the arrangement, but in the levels of things and what you're hearing, how much of it is coming at you at one time. But as far as they were using all custom EMI equipment, mic preamps, and the mixing console, and all that is proprietary equipment for them and by them. And it was the best of the best at that time. They were so creative with the new technology that was there in terms of the synthesizers and things like that. On the Run is a great example, and Any Color You Like. But they didn't overdo it. It was perfectly
serving the concept.
Just another part of the orchestration. You know, it wasn't to showcase it. It wasn't it created more of a cinematic, especially On the Run. I mean, it's cinema. That is pure cinema on vinyl. And it takes you exactly where you are supposed to go, where they want you to go. The beauty of that experience, I can only point to my own discovery of it, you know, as a 13-year-old with headphones. It's better than any movie. You know, you lay there in the dark listening to that record, and it's a book, it's a movie, it's all of those things, you know. It's
a world unto itself.
Yeah. And you're not looking at anything, you're just listening and imagining. And for the power of the sound to be able to invoke that's incredible. And the depth of it was a big part of that. You know, just the sonics of it. But what I was saying before is, you know, if you want to get a little technologically geeky with it for a minute.
Always.
They still had limited tracks. They did start layering a lot in terms of vocals, especially by the end of the record. You think of Brain Damage Eclipse.
Brain Damage Eclipse.
So you can tell that the bandwidth decreases a bit there, especially one of the things too, and not a lot of people may know this, for LPs, when the later cuts on the album are out in a smaller diameter, the grooves are closer together. You can't print as much low end on that. So the mastering for those later songs have less low end on them. And it's not because they didn't mix them well. They had to master that way.
Because of the medium.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if any of the re-releases have compensated for that. If there's no remaster of Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
There is.
I think 2011.
Oh, okay.
Maybe?
I should probably check that out.
Yeah, it was all remastered, sure.
I wonder, you know,
if that was
I'm sure it's
compensated
been
for.
improved. But also it's the stacks of choir
of the choirs.
You know, so they're limiting how much bouncing things from multiple
reductions.
Tracks to a single track, and it's just...
I do hear it on Us and Them.
Yeah, Us and Them, and definitely the end of Eclipse is
crunchy. It starts to squeeze a bit. It does.
It's a bit crunchy. But it's still brilliant and
powerful.
Yeah.
And visceral.
Totally.
It is.
Totally. It doesn't have the space that the earlier tracks
have,
respectively per side have, like Money.
And Breathe. And Time, obviously.
Yeah. Us and Them in the verses is incredibly spacious.
It is.
That's a universe unto itself.
It is.
You know? And the way his voice sounds and his ability of double tracking flawlessly, you know, that's it's just... It's velvet. It is. It's like a red velvet cake. You know, it's just...
It's so sensual.
Yeah.
It's a sensual album, too.
Yes.
For a bunch of cold English dudes.
Stiff upper lip. Yeah.
British. It's quite a sensual experience.
Yeah.
Especially on headphones.
Absolutely.
Let's go through it.
Sure. Why not?
They had to give Nick Mason a
writing credit.
A writing credit.
Is that where Speak to Me is? Yeah.
Speak to Me is credited to drummer Nick Mason. And maybe he did create it. Dark Side of the Moon, as Ryan so wonderfully stated, is a cinematic experience of the mind. It's intended for you to close your eyes and see it yourself. Just like a great book, but better because they're singing to you and it's all music. And music is the best thing. But the voices, that's another thing why Dark Side was so novel at the time. You got to hear Dark Side of the Moon, man. You got to hear it. Maybe even Stone Man, because they're talking and these strange voices, and they recorded all these people and they asked them questions about, are you afraid of dying? And these kind of heavy philosophical human questions. And they cobbled together these people's random answers, and they flowed in and out of this record in the ether. And it's fascinating, and it's kind of scary, and it's exciting, and it's edge of your seat kind of stuff. And then there's the woman screaming, but it fades in on a heartbeat, I mean, think about this record, man.
Well, this is where the cinema comes from. But those voices are just as much of the compositional aspect of it now.
Yeah, they're part of
yeah.
part of the of the picture.
If you were to be tasked with scoring Dark Side of the Moon, the original,
for
performance, you would have to have a line.
You got to have those
in the score for the voices,
and the introduction of time.
Sure. All
of the introduction of money.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's incidental is music.
It is music. It's music concrete, and there is a strong Beatles connection. Dark Side of the Moon in 1973 could be argued that it is the next Beatles album after Abbey Road and the White Album and Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
John Lennon and the Beatles, and that's unfair of me to say, because Paul McCartney was just as experimental, avant-garde, and out there as his partner, John Lennon. For the record, but the stuff they're doing on Sgt. Pepper, the sound effects, they started on Revolver with Yellow Submarine. When you get to Good Morning, and A Day in the Life, it's an event, it's a whole, and a part of the connective tissue and the binding device of these kind of artistic statements are these other sounds. They're integral to the effect, and the Beatles were doing it, and Raj and Dave and them were hearing it, and it's going, like, I loved how you said all of these novelty things that the Floyd did on this record were not ever abused or overused. They were there to serve the concepts and themes that they're discussing. The same can be said of the Beatles. The Revolution 9 thing, love it or hate it, I happen to love it. I think it's great. But the Moog synthesizers on Abbey Road, just like you're saying, it's like the synthesizer that creates On the Run, the bass, the musical basis of On the Run, pulsating through that thing. The same can be said of the way that the Moog, the synths are used on Here Comes the Sun and Maxwell's Silver Hammer and stuff like that. It's like they just perfectly serve the larger statement, as do, a lot of Dark Side of the Moon comes right out of Revolution 9 when you think about it.
Yeah, it's an extension of that aesthetic, I think, for sure.
They're just doing it in a far more musical, relevant manner, in which Revolution 9 is the piece itself, and there's talking in it, and it's this sound collage, John Lennon's painting of what he thought revolution looked like in 1968, where the sonic embellishments of Dark Side of the Moon are serving Roger Waters' portrait of humanity in 1972. Yeah. And I think to greater effect.
Absolutely. And I think also, to go back to one of the things you were touching on before, it's the collaborative, whether it wasn't a active collaboration in terms of give and take, but the fact that they used random strangers or whatever, people that were around, they used their voices and ideas and phrases and responses. That's another piece of a collaborative puzzle, each of those things, and that's what even strengthens the art in that way too. It broadens the vision of it because it's not just theirs.
It's everyone.
Yeah, the questions are posed by him or them or whatever, but these answers and reactions are,
the human race.
It's fantastic. It's. I mean, what a brilliant idea to even include in the album at all. It creates these vignettes. There's a vignette within each of these moments. That you imagine what this person might look like and
what they've been through.
Yeah,
where.
Sometimes you don't really know what they're saying. Like, it's beneath the music enough to not really know. Yeah.
Play it again.
Yeah. It's really great. I mean,
it is.
Yeah. So what a great idea.
It's so engaging. And so you get the heartbeat, which begins and also ends the record, because that's the center of everything. But the heart and the heartbeat is also a clock.
Yeah.
Setting a rhythm and a time stamp.
And winding your life down from the second it begins.
From the second it begins.
I think that's a real major theme with this. I mean, it's in the song, shorter of breath, one day closer to death. So, but it's the truth. It's start the clock. Here you go. and it's winding down. You know, you may not think of it that way. You know, he had this concept. It's not a secret anymore. Most people know, if they know about the concept of Dark Side of the Moon, his realization that he was waiting for life to begin and realized, oh,
wait a minute.
It did.
It already has.
You know?
And I'm 10 years
Yeah.
come behind me.
Right. And I can relate to that.
I better start.
Yeah, I can relate to that pretty heavily.
I think everybody can.
You know? Like, all right, well, this is just the warm-up round.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Well, his other guy, Bob Dylan, get busy living or get busy dying.
Right.
These are the themes of Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
The woman screams. It's a bit of a nightmare here on planet Earth, folks. It's awesome, but it's scary business being alive on this planet. And there's a lot to be concerned with being a human being. And you better take a breath.
Yeah.
You better learn to regulate your breathing, which is the first thing out of their mouths after that sensational, psychedelic, moody E minor, A major chord progression with Dave's fabulous. Is that a phase guitar? Can you talk to me about what's happening instrumentally there?
Univibe or a phaser type of effect, and it's just a whooshing,
swirling,
just really beautiful. Again, velvety sort of. That's a sensual sound, because it gives the texture of those simple
chords
tones and chords. It gives that a little more life and a little more movement. That's what it is. There's movement to effects like that, are modulation, they call it. So there's a moving element to it. So even if you played one note as a straight tone, the effect itself moves the pitch. The filter, it moves whatever aspect of it. There's many types of modulation effects, but that one in particular wraps it in this sort of velvety cloak,
magic cloak.
Yeah, it's just really... and the space, again, there's so much space where you have no choice but to be aware of what every single person is doing. It's the beauty of it. And then this otherworldly sound shows up in the form of a lap steel played by Dave Gilmour, giving you you walk out into the world and there's the sky, and I think of that song as kind of leaving your house for the day, what I'm saying? And you're walking out into the world.
Into it.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do?
Right.
And what's ahead? What are you beholding?
Yeah.
As the world greets you, and you greet the world.
Right.
And the drums sound so great.
Yeah,
too. It's just gorgeous. And that plunking bass. And what's Rick doing?
On the roads.
Right.
And then eventually organ in the second verse.
Right. When he floods
you with run, rabbit, run. I mean, because then it starts to get more intense, and you're like, and I think the uncertainty creeps in. And then, and that's leading. This song is perfectly escalating towards On the Run, because it's the lyrics and the intensity of the composition and the arrangement push you in the direction of now you're on the treadmill. Yeah, you just get thrown onto the treadmill,
and off we go into the modern world.
You're first walking, making your way through the world. You start your day. You get okay. Well, this is difficult, and then this is even more difficult, and then you realize something is about to happen, and then boom, you're in life, baby. Like that's it. It's just.
And it's a race.
The treadmill, yeah.
It is a race. That's why they call it the human race.
Yeah.
So Breathe is exposition. It's the beginning of our film.
Yeah.
And the door opens and we step out into the day. And take a breath. Breathe. Do it. Because you know what? There's nothing better. You ever walk out in a day and you take a deep breath? There's nothing like it. And don't be afraid.
And it's basic. It's primal, and it's...
elemental living. Yeah. You gotta respirate. Breathe in the air. Take it in. Take in the world. Get ready, because it's coming for you. Don't be afraid to care. Say what you want, but when a great poet connects, it's a humbling thing, and it's a gift. It's a gift. When the great poets tell you how to live your life, it's a good thing to listen.
Yeah.
And pay attention and take heed. Don't be afraid to care. Look around. Choose your own ground. That's how to live, man.
Yeah. And it's all things intrinsically, I think.
Yeah.
You just have to be reminded.
You got to be reminded, and you got to be. It's got to be articulated in a way that's going to stick.
Yeah.
Right here in the heartbeat. So he nailed it. They nailed it. The vocals. That's, I would assume, Dave and Rick in harmony there. Gorgeous.
Yeah, that's taking the echoes
thing
to the next
level.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that they hit upon on echo. It's so beautiful. The echoes, Gilmore Wright harmony, and the chord progression in the second half. Da 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 da.
C major 7, B minor. 7, yeah.
And then what? F,
G,
and then that great. What is that? Some diminished beautiful chord.
Sharp, D dominant sharp 9, and then flat 9.
And that's Rick Wright. Right.
And he revealed in one of their behind the music things that he lifted that from a Miles Davis record. So there it is. But that's him being. But that's Rick genius,
Wright.
You know?
That's what I'm talking about. Collaboration.
Yeah.
Like it's basically a simple pop song cloaked in velvet magic and effect and mood. But then if you can just slip me 2 African American chords, if you don't mind, because Rick Wright had a penchant for jazz harmony. Yeah. That's where you win.
Yeah. Yes. What better way to bring it back
at the end
to the E minor? You know,
yes, that's a perfect harmonic segue back into the E minor.
And then they land with it on the
end
B
on
minor.
the B minor.
But that's
after the softly spoken magic spells.
The reprise. Yeah, that brings you into
Great Gig.
Yeah.
So let's find our way to On the Run.
But that ends with does the same turnaround.
Da da da.
Yeah. Same exact.
Da 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 da.
Right. So it's the C
on the biggest wave.
Right. So that's the F to G. D dominant sharp 9, D dominant flat 9,
grave.
and then E minor. It's an E minor 9 as well. He's got the F sharp.
Yeah, that F sharp in there. It's gorgeous.
Buried in the
and
bottom
is that A7?
A7.
So E minor 9, A7, and that B7. And it's just such a simple, beautiful. So it's like the prologue, really, of the play, right? And then you race. There's the word. You human race towards an early grave. And we're often running into On the Run, right?
Yeah.
And that cinematically is where the voices return.
Voices and estimations of travel sounds, you know?
Right. It's like you're in some kind of train station or an airport or some. I view it as like a European train station. Yeah. Kind of like a Mission Impossible.
You're missing your departure.
Right. or that great Matt Damon stuff. The Bourne stuff. Yeah. That's what that does for me.
Yeah.
When I hear On the Run, I get a Matt Damon Bourne.
The Europe thing.
Or Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Although these things came much later, obviously. So what would it be in 73? It would be more like The French Connection. You can really see it. You can see the inside of the building that the guy is sort of hustling through.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
There's the footsteps, the breathing, and then all the wacky sounds.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's an amazing oral experience. AURAL, oral experience. Excuse me.
It has to be specified.
Yes, it has to be. And hopefully we'll all have our share of the other oral experiences as well. All right, so On the Run, of course. Does On the Run end in a explosion of some kind?
Yeah, I would imagine it's the breakdown of it's
right.
Yeah, the breakdown of your attempt to be on time,
to get on time, or maybe something goes down.
Yeah, right. So,
and out of the rubble
is the realization that time is
relentless,
beyond your control,
not in your control. Time's got nothing to do with it. Right. Time isn't holding us. Time isn't after us. Yeah. Same as it ever was.
And again, there's another cinematic foray into space and imagination with this rototom solo now, you know, in the Time intro. You know, a little bit of just a note. It's a note. An E.
Right. And are we an E and an F sharp? Are those the two notes? That's all you get.
Eventually it goes to A. You know,
but it's framing. It's the framework.
Back and forth. Yeah, back and forth. And there's an F sharp A and then back to the E.
For Nick.
Yeah.
And what is that?
Rototoms. So it's a shell. So it's a shellless drum. Yeah. So it's basically drums? It's a rim and the head, and you can
tune it
by turning it on a threaded hinge that tightens the head. So it's, instead of tuning each key, once that's in place, you can just globally tune each drum. And if you really listen carefully, I think he had 2 sets of 3 or 4, and they're tuned to the chord changes. Very, very subtle, but it's there.
But it's there. I mean, it's so thoughtful.
And, that creates, in my mind, so the great thing about all of this is
it's
the
interpretation.
interpretive worth. In my mind, that's sort of initially, that whole piece is putting the concept of time in more of a like
impressionist.
Yeah, godlike. Like there's
Yes.
somewhere there's a
There's
timekeeper. Somewhere there's
the
an
pharaohs
entity.
of
Yeah, there's an
time
entity that's
keeping
what time is. It's
Father
it's
Time?
supernatural. I don't know. It's supernatural. There's a supernatural element to time. This is all of time. That's what it is. This is showing you all of time. You know what I'm saying?
the full expanse.
Yeah.
Which
You
is
know?
the cover too.
Yeah.
Which is the
Right.
light through the prism
Yeah.
and then out the other
Yeah.
way.
It's everything.
The
So
wavelengths of time
this is all of
and
it.
space.
then it narrows you back down to our experience, to the earthly
Specific
concept and constraint of time. And then you're back on earth.
grinding.
Yeah.
It's
and
a
that's
it's
what
a grind.
that whole beat is.
That rhythm is a grind.
Yeah.
Faux show.
Mhm.
Can we
Yeah.
briefly talk about how beautiful the actual time sound effect collage is before the Nick Rototom solo? What was
Well,
how
there's
was
the
that
heartbeat
achieved?
thing, which is a bass, believe it or not. That's Roger muting the bass strings right above the pickup and just picking the muted strings. And they looped it.
and they looped
on
it
a yeah.
as a rhythmic
Right. And there's
foundation.
there's the vibrato scanner on the Hammond organ.
But
That's
what
that-
I'm talking about the crashing of all the clocks and
Oh, that's a BBC recording. They just took stock BBC recordings
of all
clocks,
kinds
like
of time,
stuff they would
time
use for
pieces.
TV and film, and they
collaged it.
yeah, most of their incidental.
That's
sound
the word, by
effects,
the way, I was
you
looking
know,
for.
Yeah,
Thank you earlier.
Are-
Incidental
yeah.
music
most of their incidental things are
are from the
BBC
libraries.
library.
Yeah, because they had it all at their disposal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
as far back as Grantchester Meadows and things like that, with the birds and the
Sure.
all that stuff. It's all BBC stuff.
And the Beatles stuff was too.
Probably, yeah.
It was all from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't think they created much of that on their own. I think
Right.
It was
They
pulling-
take it and they
Yeah.
create the collage picture.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so jarring.
Yeah.
That first
Oh my God.
that
of
first
course.
entrance of the chiming,
Sure.
whatever that is.
It's like everything at once. Yeah. They had to. I mean, and think of it now in terms of computers, Pro Tools, whatever you want to call it. It would be easy to
do that.
visually line all that stuff up and say, okay, here's where all the clocks chime. They were fishing through tape recordings of things. Everything's linear. So they had to cut things to synchronize when they wanted it to be there. And a lot of it was hard work. Very creative stuff and very difficult things to do. People had to know what they were doing. The early engineer
In their
guys
white
from
coats.
EMI were all,
Heavy
were
trained.
very serious
people.
people. Yeah. Suit and tie and lab coats,
And doing it.
Yeah. So, and those guys had the benefit of that sort of technology at their disposal. And that's the only way it was done then anyway. They had the cream of the crop, so to speak. So, so that's tape loops.
And then Raj.
And then there's like a little distant thunder sound. And then the bass loop comes up.
Bass loop comes
which
in
is
and then
a pseudo clock heartbeat.
That's a
sort of
clock.
thing,
Timekeeper.
Yep. And then guitar and synth as a layered sound to give you those gigantic E's and F sharps. So it's like
And there-
a
and there
single
you go.
mode bass tone and
that
guitar,
high, there's a high
like a
pitch
surf guitar sort of sound, and then he's got the organ up top with the
up on the top, the shimmer.
scanner vibrato on that. That's like, that's
Yeah.
very cool.
And then Nick.
And then the rotos,
Nick goes to town.
yeah, and it's and then he sprinkles in
Yes, and then Rick
Rhodes,
is those
you know,
pretty notes.
yeah,
Against
cascading
the
arpeggios of the chords.
the expanse of time,
Yep.
of universe time.
Yeah, that's sort of like the music box. Those spinning clocks with the little balls in the bottom that have the nice chimes. He's giving you that
giving
there.
you that.
So it's all really right on the money.
Primo.
Yeah, it's things that you don't have to think too hard about what you're hearing in terms of
to understand what it is,
right,
and
like,
what's being conveyed.
Right. Here's the imagery. That's the hallmark of
the greatness.
Yeah, of the musicianship, the musician's approach to storytelling. Here's the sounds of your life. Here's and we're just using our instruments
in a language we can all understand.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And then he comes crashing into the grind with the ticking away, and off we go.
That's it.
And the way that Roger conveys that lyrically, and could not be more brilliantly executed than by David Gilmour and that gruff voice of his. It's the Dobbs, as my grandpa Jack used to say. He's spitting it out. The moments that make up the dull day. Well, it wouldn't have to be so dull if you really did take a breath and weren't afraid to care. And then you wake up and then you give me that lyric. What's the lyric of time?
Taking away the moments that make up the dull day, you fritter and waste the hours. Because when you're young, I think that's a look at
a youthful time.
Yeah, at your perception. It's the theme of what we were saying before of waiting for life.
Waiting for it to
He
begin.
says it, kicking around on a piece of ground in your hometown, waiting for someone or something to show you the way. There's nothing kind of guiding you in that way. And the wake-up call is the realization of the urgency. And you run to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking, chasing around to come up behind you again. Now you're like, there's the second half of this lyric is the realization of the urgent nature.
Yes, and the finite nature.
Yeah. And they lead into that with the guitar solo. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. So that's...
Oh, man.
Yeah. Then one day you find the bridge. You're tired of lying in the sunshine. You're staying home to watch the rain. Because you're young.
And that's Rick Wright.
Life is long. You've got time to kill today.
And that gorgeous echoes melody again with the two of them in harmony again.
Yep.
So gorgeous.
Yep. But then one day you find 10 years have got behind you.
Whoa.
Not before that moment on record, I think, has David Gilmour done anything that
powerful.
Incredibly powerful.
That's his first amazing thing.
Yeah. Everything about it, too. The sound, the emotion, the
choices,
composition,
the phrasing,
the length of it, the tone painting.
The tone painting in sound of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally perfect.
Yeah.
It's the perfect complement to the theme that's being discussed. Yeah, and what a massive achievement. And yeah, I agree. That's the moment where David Gilmour fully blooms as one of the great all-time lead guitar players. One of, I'd say, top 3 for me.
Sure.
All time. I mean, who's better than Gilmour?
In moments like that, no one.
Yeah, I mean, the dude was. Yeah, it's just
because again,
the ultimate.
It's the same maturity in terms of using space and tone to
tell
it's
a story.
So cinematic. Yeah, it's
tell a story.
Yeah, it is storytelling on an instrument, and in a very abstract way. It's just beautiful. If you remove it from its
from
context,
any kind of context or meaning,
it's still
a thing.
Yeah,
it's still an amazing piece of music and human expression.
Right. I mean, you consider classical composition as an abstract art form because there's no lyrical, unless it's opera, obviously, but there's no lyrical attachment to anything. So get the story from the notes, or whatever you get from the notes. And that stands on its own in that way too, which so many other moments on that record do as well. That's another beautiful part of them and their ability to, I keep saying tone paint, but it's that way. Their brush strokes as instrumentalists have abstract beauty
that stands on its own,
right,
without lyric or context.
Yeah.
Hence the greatness of that band.
Yeah.
And the collective that they were.
Right.
All 4 of those guys were able to do that with their instruments. Rick Wright too.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to that. So time, wow. Every year is getting shorter. Plans that never seem to find the time. Plans that either come to naught. Half a page of scribbled lines. Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. Now that's Raj taking a swipe at the British. That's how we are, folks. That's how we are. Quiet desperation.
He lifted that line, not really lifted, but
it's inspired.
Paraphrased Henry David Thoreau's line about leading a life of quiet desperation. And then he turned it around on
the British. It's such a powerful, evocative, provocative thing to say.
Yeah.
Gosh. And it's true. A lot of people live like that.
Well, yeah, it's sort of a surrender
to your
way.
fate or to your You know, it makes me think of Anthony Hopkins in The Remains of the Day.
Yeah.
That's what that movie is entirely.
Yeah.
He is hanging on in quiet desperation. So much so that he can't live a life. And he doesn't get together with Emma Thompson and they never consummate, and that's that.
Yes.
So the time is gone. What is it? The time is gone. The song is over.
I
thought I had something more to say. Now, is that the same two chords right there that descends back into the breathe reprise?
Hanging on a quiet desperation is the English. Right, B minor 7.
The song is over.
Right. Thought I had something more to say.
So
another Rick Wright moment, I'm
B
sure.
minor to F.
Yeah.
Which just drops into the more to say.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. That's Rick. Yeah. Thank you, Rick Wright. All right.
Thanks, Rick. And then they reprise Breathe. Home. Home again. I like to be here when I can. I come home cold and tired. It's good to warm my bones beside the fire.
I picture that as the shelter of
the shelter from the rat race.
Yeah, just right.
It's good to be home after a day of on the run and dealing with the urgency of wasted time. Not to mention what's coming next, which is the urgency of money and the need for that in the construct of the modern world. So here we are at the end. And then they take this fabulous detour into some mystical idea. Far away across the fields. Like what's
holding of the iron? Well, maybe it's the foreshadowing the Great Gig in the Sky idea in a sense. I mean, it sort of is a nod toward religion, right?
Some kind of
calls the faithful to their
needs.
Hear the softly spoken magic spell. Maybe that's silent prayer, vespers of some kind. Something that's
it's mystical in nature. There's something otherworldly and mystical about it.
It sets up the
funeral of the Great Gig in the Sky.
Yeah, and there's I guess there's a. They would sometimes also refer to that as religion in the concept.
Yes.
Of the origin of its concept. It's not just death, but religion.
And why?
Yeah.
The reasons for mankind's need for religion.
Yeah.
Which is because we're racing time and mortality.
And reconciling
that is why.
Death.
Reconciling death.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Think about it. Roger Waters never knew his father. So from the time he was a small child, the specter of that hung over Roger Waters' life.
Well, death was a part of his
life
and it's from the beginning.
His entire life.
Sure.
And it's the muse that created all of this incredible art. All of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear it in the free four.
Yeah. I mean,
I am the dead man's son.
He's never once he got on that.
He never left it.
Yeah.
I mean, and then war.
Yeah.
Through that war.
But
war took my father from me.
It's the same thing.
But it's the same thing. And that's why people war. That's why people go to war. That's why people hate each other. And that is the clock and the inner heartbeat of Dark Side of the Moon. And that's what Roger Waters is talking about. And then amazingly, he hands it over to Rick Wright to create the most powerful statement about mortality.
With not one lyric.
With not one word. I mean, this is when these cats were operating at the highest level of creativity and that process.
Yeah.
They hear Rick's playing those gorgeous chords at the piano, and Dave and Raj probably said, okay, that's the one about death. And then that woman, Claire Torrey, wailing.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way it evolves is great too, because it begins in this pastoral.
Oh, and doesn't it start with, I have no fear of death? Or
it's one of the older.
One of the older people is talking.
I'm not frightened of dying.
Right. I'm not frightened of dying.
Why should I be?
Why should I be?
You got to go sometime.
It's like fear of death or not fear of death.
Yeah.
How are you going to, it's your choice. How are you going to negotiate your life? Breathe in the air. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to care.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But the way it starts is pastoral, kind of angular chord motion. But then as soon as the drums come in, the undertow has gotten you. that's it. You're in this
taking you away into
you're
this
spiraling into the death zone. You
storm
know?
of mortality.
Yeah. So
And they're raging there. And is that also the 1 minor 4 major progression, right?
Yeah.
That courses through the whole album. That's the main.
They do that in G.
The main harmonic motif of the album is a 1 minor
Comes
4
back again
major.
later in
It comes back later in any color you like.
Yeah.
And it's the basis of Breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Elemental ingredients,
Yeah.
right? To make grand statements, both musically and lyrically. That vocal is obviously one of the great performances by any human. She did receive a co-write, ultimately, I do believe.
Really? Okay.
Which I think is good.
Yeah.
And yeah, what can be said? We're all going to the great gig in the sky. Hopefully, after a lot of time has gone by. So there it is. That's the end of side 1. And then, of course, the other governing force of our society.
Yeah. The construct, the prison, whatever you want to call it, the entirely human-made
Meaningless
structure.
Meaningless construct.
Yeah.
That is money.
Yeah.
And how it is the root of all evil today.
Which, you know, is one way to look at it. It's unfortunately the way it's been it has manifested in life. Some people look at money as just another form of energy, and there can be
and possibility
good or bad energy
and potential.
Right? Yeah, right. So,
money
you know,
is used for good
I think
sometimes.
like anything that's around us, whether it's man-made or not, money has power. You know, money is a powerful thing. And so like when people are given the choice of how to use that power, humanity unfortunately doesn't usually do it the right way. That's any powerful entity. We're seeing that now with social media and the internet. We're seeing that with energy. You know, anything powerful
that
and
speaks of power.
Yeah.
I think that's what that song is about.
Yeah.
That song is a satirical send-up of the rich, of the wealthy class,
Right.
or a part of the wealthy class. I mean, there are
well, it's that
benevolent wealthy people.
Yeah, no, but of how it,
but going after the money.
Yeah, and
with
how it
all you
also
got.
gets you. You know, like don't take a slice of my pie. You
Oh
know?
yeah,
Like
think I need a Lear jet.
you know,
Buy me a football team.
yeah. And also the original, you know, the first line. The lyrics are very progressively seem to encapsulate a life cycle, sort of in a lot of ways. You know, very in these little snapshots, line by line, of what you can experience as you age or as you go through life. You know, get a good job with more pay and you're okay. Everybody thinks that when they're getting out into the world. Like I
gotta
have security.
You gotta set it
know?
up.
Yeah. So that's the first thought.
But then you want more.
Right. So the lyrics,
Build that
he's
way.
really good with that. It's not just a random line here and there that's a statement on the topic. It's
a progression. And how it corrupts
Yeah.
the soul. And that lick, dun, 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 right? Is that in 7?
They called it their transcontinental blues
romp.
Yeah.
Dun,
In
dun,
7,
dun,
right.
Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun,
Which,
dun,
you know,
dun.
by the way, I'm sure none of their prog tendencies, if you want to even call it that,
Were conscious even.
Yeah.
They weren't thinking
Just-
in those terms.
Roger's thinking and following lyric phrases. Nick is doing his best to keep up. So,
Doing a fine job.
Yeah.
Fine job.
Yeah.
It's real creative
yeah, totally.
playing.
So you know,
That's another incredible ensemble performance
yeah.
of the
Oh,
band.
yeah. And another epic guitar
Epic
romp.
Dave.
You know, yeah, he's really
Killing.
just
Huh.
you know, he's just catapulted. That's one of those records where his ability, or at least what he was able to say through the vehicle of those songs as a soloist, it was such a catapult from where he left off.
They nailed it.
Yeah.
They nailed it on each one of these tracks.
Yeah.
And you're right. And that also speaks again, circle back around to the collective strength,
Mm.
where when you're in a collective with somebody who is your equal on whatever it is they're bringing to the table, and you've got some concept that can't be beat, and it allows them to play a guitar solo, some musical statement that perfectly encapsulates your theoretical or thematic concept, and the two just live together in eternity. That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
And that cannot be bettered, improved, replaced. Sorry.
Well, you were laying a lot of fertile ground.
Yeah, for what's to come. And we're going to get there
so-
pretty soon now.
Yeah.
So let's cruise on. Money is as good as it gets, obviously. That breakdown in the middle is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're just all so
Yeah,
great.
the Wah-Wah Wurlitzer.
With the Wah-Wah Wurlitzer, those little stabs he's doing, and then Dave's stabs, and Nick's rolling. And it's just so beautiful and cartoonish in a way that doom, 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 doom.
It is.
That's that it's like Ebenezer Scrooge, I always thought.
Yeah.
In his money pursuit.
Yeah.
It's Ebenezer Scrooge tramping along, and bah humbug,
right.
That bit.
Yeah. There's a machine-like quality to that also, too. Almost like there's a clock. There's it's just going.
And boom. And the cash register and the coins.
Right, and then there's that. There's
wow.
Great loops again.
And so it's just so musical.
Put it together perfectly.
And so memorable. It's just like, when you use incidental music that becomes integral and memorable, as much a hook as anything else, how do you lose?
Right.
You don't.
Yeah.
That's why this thing is so monumental. And then money flows into what you said. And money is at the root of what Us and Them is talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the impetus for
all
the problems that Us and Them exposes.
No, don't take a slice of my pie, and I'm going to kill you, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's okay because you're them.
Right.
And we're us. And we're supposed to be enemies, and we're supposed to be at war and isolating from each other. It's a direct response to Imagine.
Yeah.
The idea that, but yes, John, there are boundaries, and this is why. And it's an illusion set up by some power body politic that does not want us united. It just doesn't. Yet another reason why this incredible album, 50 years later, continues to grow in its relevance. Yeah. I mean, we're at the precipice of something. This is a crossroads in this world history right now. That is Us and Them.
And it keeps playing out in different regions and different aspects of society. It's not just war. It's not just nations.
No, it's have and have not.
Yeah. It's basic. That's what it is. Or it's the absolute inability to ignore, or not ignore, to embrace, I should say, difference and celebrate it and be unafraid.
Not be afraid.
It's fear-driven. It's fear, and it goes back to
the second line.
What you're saying, though.
There it is.
But what you're also saying, and it all ties in. But the
fear
death,
of mortality.
The mortality issue, there's a fear. I think it's fear-driven. Is all of it, and that's money. The people holding on, call it everything. Have not. All the people with are terrified to give it up, to share it,
or to give it, or share it.
Yeah, not everyone, but that's how the structure at large is.
His expression of the division between people, almost laughably simple. But incredibly powerful with that delay. The us, us, in all that space that you talked about.
Yeah.
And them. And is this a Rick Wright piece too?
Yeah.
Us and Them?
Yeah.
Those chords, they're just so gorgeous.
Yeah.
The way they're moving over that D major pedal.
Yeah.
And using the space and taking their time. And sure, the psychedelic drug thing could play a part if you saw fit. I never saw the need for it, given that it's such a drug-like experience in and of itself. But it's probably a great album to do drugs to.
Purely speculative. You're
purely speculative, of course.
Yes,
but that's part of this album's appeal.
Sure,
through the generations.
Well, I think, that depends on who you are, what drugs you're doing, and where you are at in your life. Yeah, I did that in high school,
I think most people did.
Yeah, and it was, I can't speak to that much now. I just know that anything that I listened to in that state at that time in my life was amazingly eye-opening. And, a afternoon at Disney World or something like that. It was an experience, a ride.
Mind-opening, mind-blowing thing.
Just entertainment beyond, your wildest imagination at that point in your life, and perfectly set up, be delivered that way.
Yeah.
But it's that good no matter what.
Oh yeah, it's good.
You
It's
know.
totally amazing straight.
And,
yeah.
I mean-
and I would vote straight personally.
It's color, it's experience, it's laying down in a waterbed. There's these the way it sounds is
There's a wave.
yeah. There's an ocean like. Imagine you're just adrift on a raft. Us and Them has sort of that
Yes, that floating,
sort of thing to it, you know?
undulating,
Yeah.
wavelength.
So if you get into that zone, like a lot of the music puts you in a place where you're able to receive these lyrics.
They're
You know.
couched in the
Yeah.
perfect music.
Yeah. Again, it's a delivery mechanism. You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
Yeah.
Where the music is the perfect delivery system for whatever thought or statement you're trying
Yeah.
to make, then you've got Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. The lyrics go in different directions, like different sides of that story. From the more global, forward he cried, from the rear and the front ranks died. You know, that's his
Probably his
look on the war idea.
Yeah.
But then much more personal later. Out of my way, it's a busy day. I've got things on my mind. So I can't even deal with.
I can't deal with the world
Yeah,
view.
right.
I got it. It's tough enough just getting
Yeah.
through the day every day.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
And after all, it's what the fighting's all about.
Yeah.
And there's the humor too. You get that Lennon-y humor too with this guy. He's special. Roger Waters,
Yeah.
special. And David Gilmour's. They were all four of these guys were uniquely special artists.
Yeah.
And working together, hard to beat. Us and Them has a fantastic saxophone solo. They use saxophone to brilliant effect, these guys.
hmm
Further on Wish You Were Here album, right?
Yes.
But that sax solo is,
And Money has that.
and Money has a great sax solo too. For them to use another lead instrument in concert with David's guitar, brilliant. Who's the guy who played
Dick Parry.
Dick Parry?
Yeah.
Brilliant musicianship. Gosh. Any Color You Like is musically thematic reprise of the Breathe
Yeah, in another key.
in another, what key is that, in D minor?
D minor. Yeah.
So that's D minor, G major?
Yeah.
And that's a jam, which gives your brain a break.
But he does do something on the new record. You know, he speaks over that one. So
He speaks over all of them.
yeah, he alludes to that title as something more than just. Originally, they would use it as they lifted that idea from Henry Ford's Model T, which came in one color. And the motto was any color you like, as long as it's black. So they just, you know. But I think if you want to give it meaning, it's the potential to make your life whatever you want it to be.
see fit.
You know.
It could also mean, I love that. It could also mean that we're all beautiful,
So,
like ice cream flavors.
right.
Any flavor you like.
And it is a very colorful sounding piece of music.
Yeah. Oh, they're rocking.
You know.
I mean, that's
to me that music sounds like that looks.
like this.
Yeah.
This fabulousness
You know?
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah. That's what that
Right.
sounds. It is that, you know.
The rainbow.
Yeah. So
And they're a great jam band.
yeah. And they just it ties in the package of everything, you know.
Yes.
It's that. And you know, so if you think of that, it ties in the motif musically, it ties in the artwork. It's a break. It's them
Gets a
jamming.
stretch.
You know,
They
it's,
stretch.
They're
They're
still
jamming
doing what they did.
on Echoes.
Yeah, right.
And one of these days.
All of that stuff, you know,
Which was a big part of the Pink
Yeah,
Floyd
right.
experience.
and it's that's their little groove, you know, that they
that they perfected. Yeah.
that's
Hypnotic,
that's
relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
makes you feel great.
Yep.
You're in the groove. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And they managed to use that same Rick Wright turnaround to get you into the
Brain
D
damage.
major
Of brain damage.
of brain damage. Yeah.
Is that the same
Same chords.
same chords?
Whole step down. So pretty awesome. So that's B flat, major 7 to the A.
A minor,
Yeah. And then
and then da, da, E flat,
and then the C dominant to the flat 9, and then the D.
Falls into D major. And now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last major theme of this record is what this world can do to you.
Yeah.
And or,
well, there's
there's a lot of crazy people, folks.
Right, the mental health end of things. Which for the time, if you think of where the world was at with understanding and dealing with that, I think he was ahead for recognizing it.
Yeah.
It was thematically dealing with that already. Like songs like If I Go Insane, Please Don't Put Your Wires in My Brain. So he was in touch with that. Probably because of the Sid experience. There's a lot from there that...
He watched his good friend...
Descend
and come apart and be dismantled.
Yeah. So there's a big nod to him in that recognition and the presentation of that being with us along the way. There's a big part of life too, which is another thing that society likes to push to the side.
Well, it's more and more and more and more and more from what I can tell. Because the more people, the more people there are, the more lunatics there are.
Yeah.
May we steer clear of them, but they're on the grass and they're in the hall and the paper holds their folded faces to the floor and every day the paper boy brings more. And finally, the lunatic is in my head. And that great laugh.
Yeah.
Questioning your own sanity in a crazy world based on time and money.
And the looming
specter of death. And the divisions between humans.
Yeah.
And fear. So fear is big. And how must we counter fear? I think with love. Is that the subtext of Roger Waters and Dark Side of the Moon? I'm going to choose yes. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say I am going to breathe in the air. I am going to try to care. I'm going to try to not be afraid. I'm going to try to make the best and the most of my time. I'm going to heed the prophet, man.
Yeah.
For what I can use, for what I can take of it. I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. There is the central motif. That's a scary place. Yeah. But people thrive on that stuff too. You know, how do the people react when you sing that?
Oh, they love it.
They go nuts.
They love it.
I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. Oh, with that great.
I do wonder how many people
even
are considering what any of this means, you know.
Well,
in those moments, maybe.
In those moments, let's have a good time because we're going to die, by the way.
Right. Well,
so we better have a good time.
That's a real good argument for that, you know. But that's
that's why we
do it perform it. And that's why people come to hear it. And that's why it's as popular as it is. And that's why we're talking about it. And it's important. And it is.
And it helps.
Meaningful. Right. And it gets you through. Because like any art, it's an affirmation that you're not the only one who feels this way.
And it's good.
Yeah. Well, good art makes you feel that way.
It's good to be alive.
Feel like you're not the only one who feels this way. Life is good. At least we have this beauty to share and create and enjoy.
And these feelings that are born of that.
Yeah.
Which are good and valid. And and let's go with that. And then that's Eclipse.
It is that. And it's in a retrospective sense, I think, just thinking about the experiences, all you touch, all, you know, I mean, and that's that cascade of lines.
There's rarely been a greater poetic summation of life.
Right. Succinct, cascading lines of experience.
Against that fabulous Lennon chord progression.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's their biggest Beatles.
That's their Beatle moment.
Yeah.
Brain Damage Eclipse is the Beatle moment of Pink Floyd.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Raj sings Brain Damage and Eclipse.
Yeah.
He gets the last say.
Yeah.
And he gets the last say
again
50 years later, too. And that is our segue, ladies and gentlemen, into the dark side of the moon. Oh, by the way, there's no dark side of the moon, really. As a matter of fact, it's all dark with that heartbeat. Amazing. Excellent. I think it's a perfect record. And now we're going to talk about Roger Waters' newest release, The Dark Side of the Moon Redux. marking its 50th anniversary as a major cultural milestone. And let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to dovetail from what you said about it being a perfect album, the former, the original, being the perfect album that it is, and the cultural behemoth that it is, the
landmark,
undeniable piece of art and culture from the 20th century, that it's transcendent of an era, it's transcendent of a particular time, of a particular generation. That being said, is it sullied by taking another look at it in terms of presenting it again? Is it the artist's right to do this with their own work? Or once the artist gives something to the world, are they not allowed, but
is it appropriate?
Yeah, right. Is it, it's kind of like, I don't know, what if the Mona Lisa was repainted with her in a bikini or something like
Da Vinci said when he turned 80, I think I'll do the Mona Lisa again, because there were things about it I didn't like.
Yeah.
Things about it that don't make me feel so happy or proud about it. Or maybe not. I'm projecting that. Does Roger Waters like the initial?
Well, I don't know if that's the reason he did it.
Yeah.
That's there's a lot to, I guess,
there's a lot
speculated
about it. Why?
The most obvious answer is, and he's egomaniacal, and he's trying to not only frame himself as the singular architect of that idea and piece of art, but also that the contributions of
his three bandmates,
everyone else,
inconsequential.
Yeah, and that him as the genius architect, maybe equal parts that and equal parts his real disdain for David Gilmour
and Rick Wright.
Well, Rick can't defend himself, and if he's thinking along those lines, then I would have to even think less of him than I do already because of this particular thing. How he's treating these people, and in a very public way, and his statements
and their shared legacy.
Yeah, right, exactly. His this is a statement. Whatever he's actually said, separate from this in and of itself is a statement. He feels in some way there's a way to improve upon this, or reissue it with more meaning, or it's not even an updated thing. There's nothing to update.
It's a reimagination. It's a recasting. I'm taking it as, like you said, a somewhat ego-driven gesture to make the final statement that it was me, world. It's me. I wrote those songs. I wrote those lyrics. The reason Dark Side of the Moon is 50 years and counting and still as relevant and resonant is because of me. That's just my opinion. He may not feel that way at all.
It's hard not to.
But it's hard not to take it that way.
Yeah.
It's hard not to take this new version, which has effectively erased all the trademarks of the other three men. Iconic trademarks, musical.
Yeah.
It has, dare I say the word cancel? That word I hate. Now, yeah. I'm not going to accuse Roger Waters of being a canceller, a cancel culturist. I'm not going to do that. But when you take something as iconic as this record and you erase the guitar solos and the keyboard textures and the drumming entirely, and the voices of David Gilmour and Rick Wright. Obviously, he couldn't do it. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it. Are there ways to honor them in some way? Are there ways to reference them? Some might argue that some of that organ playing in there, it's got nothing to do with Rick Wright. It's just antiseptic, kind of
it's
anonymous. The musical
filling
backing
up the space, really.
The musical backing of this new version is, dare I say, it's like Bad Beck.
I thought that too. Not that era style.
It's like Sea Change, but not.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Mutations and Sea Change and Nigel Godrich production.
Yeah.
And clearly, Roger at some point had a Jones for Radiohead.
Radiohead is
There had to be something.
Yeah.
When Radiohead was peaking, OK Computer, Kid A, Amnesiac, was Roger Waters aware of them? Had to have been. Had to have been aware of Nigel Godrich, their producer, who also produced Beck's best work. And then Raj gets into it with Tom York about the whole Israel thing. So what's going on there? I don't assume or presume to know. And I'm not going to talk about the man's politics. I'm not going to talk about the accusations of whatever that is. I'm not so psyched about it, but I'm not going to talk about it. You and I are talking about the fact that Roger Waters has effectively taken one of the greatest works of art on a world. It's one thing for me to re-record a song of mine because no one knows it anyway. Who cares?
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
But the world, 40 million and counting or whatever it is. Dark Side of the Moon is a ubiquitous work of art. It's as if Leonardo said, no, but it's not like that because Leonardo da Vinci worked solo. So it's more like Paul McCartney saying, you know what, for the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, I'm gonna redo it. I'm gonna redo it with a couple of musicians I know, and I'm gonna talk most of it. And because it was mainly me. Anyway.
Right.
And the world needs to know that. Anyone who doesn't know that Roger Waters was the main creative engine behind all of Pink Floyd's greatest works isn't a Pink Floyd fan.
Right. That doesn't need to be presented and reiterated.
And jammed in our faces, down our throats, as it were.
Well, I have a theory about the why of it. Completely a theory that's speculative and of my own imagination. But anyway, so, if you recall 2005, when was Live 8? When was that?
Yeah. 05.
Okay. So it appeared on the outside from the performance and Roger's body language and from conversations beyond that, past that date, that he was interested in doing more with those guys. And David Gilmour was not interested in that, probably because he considered Roger to be insufferable and was happier not having to do that, which is clear back from 1987 when he was being interviewed on the topic. He was much happier to be out from the yoke of the Roger Waters tyranny, However, I think he went out of his way to, instead of just graciously decline, he went out of his way to sort of make it clear why, still that he was just not interested in being unhappy again. And I think Roger Waters took that personally.
Okay.
Which, why wouldn't he? I mean, for as evolved, this is the dichotomy of Roger Waters. For as visionary and evolved as he is in terms of understanding and viewing humanity and its behavior and the condition of the world, he still has lots of problems. This is the ultimate example of someone getting in their own way. And he's just allowed to do it because he's Roger Waters. Who's going to stop him from
doing whatever he wants?
From putting out Dark Side of the Moon.
Again.
Maybe he had somebody around him saying, that's probably not a good idea. I don't know. He might have. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't have people in his circle who are that courageous. I don't know. But he is clearly damaged by getting back in a way. His choice at Live to do Comfortably Numb with no guitar solo. There's a version of that. It's the same concept. It's the removal of the contributions
of people who may have hurt him.
Yeah, and of one of the major elements of any of that music.
The other major element.
He's going out of his way
to remove
those things. To me, that's a response as opposed to a inspired idea like, oh, let's reimagine. He's not reimagining it. He's reducing it. It's exactly what it is, but in a very pointed way.
Specific.
Yeah. You know what's missing.
You sure do. He makes it quite plain.
Yeah.
There's a lot missing.
Yeah.
And sadly, with all that great stuff missing, it's quite lacking as a piece. It's a strange listen.
Yeah. I found myself wanting to skip through many parts of it. Maybe because of my own intimacy with the music, I mean, do I need to listen to an E minor to an A7 for the next 45 seconds with pretty much nothing else
almost nothing happening
over it?
As minimal as it gets.
Yeah. So, no, I don't, first of all. There's no mystery in there for me to...
Well, there's hardly anything musical going on that's going to grab you or infuse you with any of the magic that music is supposed to give you.
Yeah.
So right there, from the get-go, we're starting out in a lacking manner.
Yeah.
It's lacking. And you know what? Truth be told, as soon as he left Dave Gilmour, in my opinion, everything he's done has been lacking in that way.
Yeah. Well, it's...
In one way, in one shape or another. And he's done some good work. I was not crazy about Pros and Cons. Clapton is the guitar voice on that.
Yeah.
It sounds good. I look at it as like the Final Cut's not nearly as talented little sibling.
Right.
It's got all the hallmarks of great Roger Waters work, but it's not really there for me, songwriting-wise. Not really. Kind of boring, but it's all the words. It's words. He got more and more wordy and less musical. I mean, Radio Chaos, no thank you. Amused to Death,
yeah, there's moments. All of them have moments.
They all have moments, but they're more sonic, evocative moments, or the brutal majesty of his singing voice than the musical greatness of the Pink Floyd because of that one-of-a-kind collaborative collective. Same can be said, in my opinion, of the Pink Floyd records that came after Roger left.
Of course.
I got no use, personally, for Momentary Lapse or Division Bell. There are pretty moments because that's what Dave Gilmour is going to give you, because that's what Dave Gilmour does.
Yeah.
But it's got none of the Roger.
No.
And I'm sorry, but when you have been tapped by the fates or the divinity to be a part of that kind of thing, the kind of thing that only happens once in your lifetime. Lennon McCartney, Waters Gilmour, go down the line, Jagger Richards, Lee Lifeson Peart, Becker Fagan, Bono Edge, Mullen Clayton, and then it rewards you the untold fortunes of life here on this planet. I'm sorry your father died, but you've lived in opulence your entire adult life, at least 50 years.
Yeah.
Dark Side of the Moon made them rich. None of those guys ever had to worry again.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. It's not because Roger Waters is a brilliant lyrical genius. That's only part of it, man. It's because David Gilmour, when he picks up that black Strat, does something that nobody else can do and provides the succor and the soothe that makes the medicine go down so easy.
Sure.
Now, fine. He walked away from it in 84.
Raj did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get it. People don't get along. Marriages end. And now we're going to come around to the whole human relationships thing. Hey, most marriages end in divorce. People don't get along. They don't get along. That we got all we got from that marriage is an incredible thing. And that dude and all of them, we rewarded them in infinitely outrageous manner. And we continue to patronize their art. Millions and millions and millions and millions. And then he goes on the road and he does The Wall. And then he does the Us and Them tour. And every tour is sold out. There's no end to the money. There's no end to the financial freedom. But that's got everything to do with that collective. And so to me, being a fan of that collective and someone who appreciates the one-of-a-kind magic of it, I think it deserves more respect.
Yeah, by him.
From one of the guys who benefited so immeasurably from it. Dave doesn't want to work anymore with you because you're tough, you're insufferable. Okay, and yeah, people get divorced. And sure, Roger Waters can do whatever he wants. I'm not begrudging that he redid Dark Side of the Moon. Do whatever you want, bro. You earned it. You wrote The Wall, bro. Right. You wrote The Wall, man. You can do whatever you want. Whatever. I don't subscribe to your politics. Whatever. I still listen to it, and I listened to this Redux, as did you.
I did too.
And what'd you think?
More than
because I'm going to say, for the record, there are a few things on there that I thought were cool.
They're cool.
There's some cool moments on it. It's not like it's god-awful, unlistenable, oh my God.
No.
What's he thinking?
Well, what he's got going for him in this is that it's him.
And it's that voice.
Right. He's
saying words.
So it's right there you get our attention. Initial reaction when I even heard this was happening was, how can he do this? Next response was, I'm not going to pay any attention to it. That went out the window, obviously. But so he's got my attention because it's him. He gives you a little bit of that, the way that what you've loved about him his whole career. And there are, there's some choices that I thought it had promise when he opened it with the free 4 lyrics. That to me,
I thought that was an interesting choice.
Was because that definitely ties in thematically with the.
Well, he's 80 now,
right? And
so he's on the other end of it.
Yeah, but it ties in with all of the subject matter of Dark Side of the Moon.
Yes,
and it's a sobering and jarring, concrete, cold way of reopening that book. Like, okay, so we're in the ride now. We're on this ride. It's coming. We're looking at it here,
we're
right
in
from the other
Roger
side,
time.
and it's Dark Side from the other side. You had the 30-year-old take on it. Now you've got the 80-year-old take on it. So strictly conceptually speaking, it's a great idea. The execution falls short, and you had said off mic earlier. You should expound upon this. That it's very self-indulgent in its execution, in its presentation. He's exploring it in ways where it didn't connect with me.
It doesn't connect because it lacks everything that makes the original connect. Even him.
Well, he's not.
He's not even there.
No. The other thing to say, though, about this, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to leave it there from my perspective, is I don't know exactly how you can unhear. There's no way to unhear the other one to really be objective about this.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what someone would think of this who's never heard the original.
Yeah.
Would they think it was interesting?
Right.
I think he could have gone way further with it musically. It's a monotonous and one-note delivery, by which I mean it's musically muted. I mean, it's played well. It sounds good.
It's sonically muted in a way, though, too.
It is. It's really laid back in the way that it is presented from an audio standpoint.
Yeah.
The drums are real one-dimensional. As I said, they sound like Beck drums.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds great.
But it's not.
But it's one.
Yeah, and it's not delivering. That choice doesn't deliver the compositions the way
they don't. It doesn't.
Need to be delivered.
Yeah. It diminishes the compositions.
Yeah.
And like you said, it reveals the simplicity of the compositions on many fronts, and they don't really hold up that way. They're not holding up.
Which is interesting, though, because if you were to sit here and play these songs for me on acoustic guitar
and just sing them,
you sang them, I don't think I'd get that same feeling that I get from this album.
It would translate. If you did that too,
Much
or
better.
if anybody with a guitar. And maybe that's how we should have done it. Instead of this plotting, I'm not going to talk about what he should have done, what he shouldn't have done. This guy, first of all, yes, from what I'm gathering, he's bitter. How much more is there to go? I don't know. It's pretty negative all the way around.
Yeah.
There's no sugar and there's no light and there's no music. Even the musicness of this music is not very musical. There's not a lot to hold on to here.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to cushion the blow of what he's saying. And not only is he saying what was originally all there, which is pretty heavy, grave stuff, but now there's all kinds of talking. So in all of the instrumental pieces from the original Dark Side of the Moon, Speak to Me, On the Run, and Any Color You Like, not to mention in the solos of Money and Us and Them, Roger is speaking. He's reciting some new poetry and some new text, except for Free For, which is an original Roger Waters lyric from Obscured by Clouds.
Yeah. And I think he read, I think it was over Great Gig or the Time intro. He read a letter.
He read a letter that he received
from someone regarding
On the Run is
cancer.
A dream.
Yeah.
That he had. He woke up from a dream,
right.
And he's telling the story of a dream.
Yes.
And this difficult or futile battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
And sure, but I got to tell you, as soon as Free For is over, I'm done with that.
Yeah, that was
it's over. Enough, man.
That aspect.
Enough of you talking.
It's overused.
It's overused.
Yeah. It's like what we were saying about imagine if the amount of,
Of
sound
stuff.
effects and voice things were used to the amount that he did that on, it would be like, okay,
Enough. You'd lose me.
leave some room for the music and for
Leave some room for your
know.
bandmates to play something.
So it's a clear statement of where he's at.
Yeah, he's got
all
a lot
about
to say,
him.
and he's going to say
Yeah.
it. And by the way, I did it all.
Yeah.
It's me. The reason it's great is me. Now, he may not mean that. I can't speak for the guy, but I can react to his art. And that's part of the deal when you're a major artist. When you're a major world artist and you've made a fortune doing it, I can give you my opinion on it. And this is my opinion. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And the singing, it's all in the lower octave. So all the beauty of
Or
the
no
melody
pitch
is
at all.
basically sucked out of it.
And there's no pitch to a lot of it.
Hardly any pitch to a lot of it.
Money.
Yeah. It's all a tired Ian McKellen doing Gandalf voice. Us and them and without. That's what the fighting's all about. I mean,
Right.
okay, over this dare I say near catatonic playing.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, bro, whoa, like, shall we? Is this the long sleep? Get prepared, right, for that, for a cold, long
This is lulling you into
the grave. No, thank you. Not that it's not cool. There's a moment here and there. I thought the Brain Damage Eclipse out is not awful.
Yeah. There's some cool little cello fills and some of the synth work is interesting.
And there's that
the vocoder thing,
vocoder,
great
female
gig,
vocoder thing,
whatever. It obscures the genderism of the voice, and it.
The vocoder in Great Gig in the Sky is weird to me.
Yeah, it is weird.
Impersonal.
It's weird. That's a particular piece of music that almost. How do you ever
represent
Yeah,
that?
right. Yeah,
But let some kind of something play it. Something.
yeah.
I don't know.
The voice thing was weird.
Weird.
I know, and uninspired because it wasn't.
Tired. It's just
Yeah.
it just seems so lulled out and tired. And is it hypnotic because of that? No.
Not really.
I didn't find myself engrossed or hypnotized.
No.
I didn't find myself relaxing, and I'll tell you why. Because there's no love here.
Right. It's
There's no love in this work. And thus there's no hope. And thus, what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
Whether he meant it or not, that's what David Gilmour was bringing to the table.
Yeah.
With his stellar musicianship. That's why people love music. Because you can say, I love you with an instrument without ever having to say it. David Gilmour is making love to the world in those guitar solos.
Yeah.
Rick Wright is making love to the world in the piano chords and the synth work on Wish You Were Here and Animals. And Roger Waters is making love to the world by being in that band, whether he wanted to or not. And I'm sorry that they didn't let you sing Have a Cigar. And I'm sorry if they didn't, if that's the case and Dave Gilmour made it clear in the press, I'd rather not with Roger anymore. It's not worth it. And if he was hurt, I'm sorry. And I'm also sorry that your father died in World War II. It's awful. And war is awful. Yeah. And the human condition is a nightmare in parts. And you as a great artist are reflecting on it and commenting on it and making statements about it. But you know what? Till the day he died, John Lennon gave me love.
Right, and he had all these
problems, this shit, if not more.
Yeah.
His mother died when he was 15. His father walked out and sailed off to sea when he was 3 or 4 years old. Everyone he knew died around him at one point or another. He never didn't give me love. And people might say, well, where's the love in the wall or Animals? It's there. And I'll tell you where it is. It's in Dave Gilmour's fingers. And that's the key, man.
Plus, it's not the same thing because those are the original expositions of those ideas. Animals is not supposed to give you love, but all of it makes sense, and it's still that same thing. It's those guys bringing their thing to the subject matter, and it's telling the story and painting the picture. Dave is doing that with his guitar. I mean, he's given you all the animals. It's a fairy tale almost. It's a story. It's a movie. It's all of these things. Dave is giving you the dog with his song,
and the pigs with the
right.
The thing that he blows into.
Yeah, he's doing all of that, and Rick is giving you the bed of dread and sinister and darkness and the chasm of despair that is sheep, the middle of sheep. That's you as a sheep walking down to the slaughter. I mean, come on, they nailed it. They always do but this is devoid of that because they're not there. And
his just one guy's guy's bitter world take at 80,
and it lays flat. It feels like the simplest way to put it, because I kept saying it about the 73 Dark Side, is it is the rainbow. This is a black and white record. This is monochrome.
Color. The one moment of color for me is when those strings go up and up and up.
Yeah. To me, that's day in the life.
That's a day in the life reference.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you got to hand it to him. Still sounds really good at 80. And those lyrics are all still great. And the new material, the new text material, I find completely confounding.
It's superfluous.
And for what?
It doesn't enhance.
It doesn't enhance what's there.
Yeah.
It doesn't complement what's there. He thought to himself, well, The Great King in the Sky, I can't go instrumental with it with a woman or somebody singing, so I better talk about this friendship I had with a guy who sadly passed away from cancer. Like, okay, but that's relevant to Roger Waters.
Right.
That is not relevant to the world.
Right.
It's not relevant in the way that the lyrics to Time and Money and Brain Damage and Us and Them and Eclipse and Breathe are relevant to the world.
You know what this sounded like to me at times? Vibe-wise, it sounded like an audiobook that had soundtrack
that had backing
to it. If Roger Waters wrote a memoir
and read it
and had that as that would be cool.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That would be amazing. But not Dark Side of the Moon, folks. Sorry. Write your memoir and read it to us.
Right, and use some cool.
And I will buy it. Yeah. I will buy the physical book and the audio book, Roger.
And score it if you want.
And then whatever you want behind it would be
all
cool.
your albums.
That's such a great point. If this was Roger Waters' memoir, that backing would be phenomenal.
Awesome. I'd
be like, how great is that backing?
You would know the songs.
You'd know it.
They weren't going to be in the way.
They're not taking any away from anything.
Yeah.
You just nailed it, bro.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of it that way. That is totally what this is, but it's not. Because it's Dark Side of the Moon.
It could have been and should have been,
Write your memoir.
Yeah.
And in your memoir, you can read all your lyrics.
Because you know what that would have been? Also, a memoir that way, or anyway, would have been another thing that he gave to the world. Now, he's taking.
He's taking. He's giving me something I cannot possibly use.
He's not giving. He's taking with this.
It's a bitter, angry guy nearer to the end of his life and spewing out some negativity, man. I'm trying not to say bad words, and I'm not. But it's negative, it's angry, it's bitter, it's ego-driven, and it has no love.
Right. And maybe he doesn't feel that he's putting it out that way. But that's how it hits.
That's how I'm receiving it. So thanks, but no thanks. I'll stick with and then there's those who will argue that, well, it's the original one's still there. This has nothing to do with that one. And you can always just listen to that one. And yeah, I will. And I'm not going to listen to this one.
But there is a weird existential and forever changed energy
about it
of surrounding the whole thing, because of that. I think
you're right. And he must mean to do that. That is intentional.
I can't now. It's not that I think of this record when I play or listen to the other one, but I have an awareness that it exists.
Yes,
and it's one of those things. It's like it's like don't ever meet your heroes concept. It's like the more this guy reveals about himself, the harder it is to continue to love him, and
patronize him.
Yeah. And that's sad, and it is a disservice to that music and to the legacy and to the cultural end of what Dark Side of the Moon really should have remained untouched about. The ego part has taken away his ability to understand that is bigger
Than
than him.
And that should be respected.
He can't,
I agree. It's beautiful. So there you go.
That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this conversation and keep coming back for more. To learn more about Stephen or myself, including links to our own musical creative endeavors, you can find us on the web at stephenbard.com and ryanball.com. Or you can find us on Instagram at stephenbard1 and at ryanballmusic. If you'd like to support the podcast, the most impactful way to do that is to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. While you're at it, leave a comment or a review. Sharing the show or your favorite episode on social media is also very helpful. Finally, donations to the podcast are greatly appreciated and can be sent via Venmo to at Stephen-Bard-Music or at Ryan J. Ball. Today's show was recorded, produced, engineered, and edited by Stephen Bard and Ryan Ball. Theme music is by Ryan Ball. We appreciate all the love and support, and we'll see you soon.